Hey, Cleveland, this is Tristan Thompson of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you're listening to Sports Fix.
American Revolution Wrestling and the Lake Erie Crushers present Brawl at the Ballpark. Saturday, August 1st at All Pro Freight Stadium in Avon. Come enjoy a live professional wrestling event featuring Hall of Famers Bret the Hitman Hart, Lita, The Franchise, Shane Douglas, Vader, Rhino, the FBI, and more. VIP tickets include a special early access meet and greet with the stars. Brawl at the Ballpark, August 1st at All Pro Freight Stadium. For more info or to purchase tickets, visit AMREVWrestling.com now.
Hey guys, J-Rocc here from the Sports Fix, and we always talking about using our platform to try to help the world and the society we live in, and everywhere I go and everywhere we go, bullying is one of the problems in today's society. There's nothing worse than any person, big or small, strong or weak, adult or child, feeling picked on, pushed around, vulnerable, and victimized at the hands of a bully. Change comes one person at a time, and my good friends at No Such Thing as a Bully are working on skills and techniques and ways that we can all change and make things better for everyone. Find out more at nosuchthingasabully.com.
Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Harry Buffalo. Harry Buffalo, join the herd.
Live in Ohio, it's time to get your fix. The Sports Fix.
Welcome in, everybody. We are live on the air, off and running. I've said this once or twice before with another edition of the Sports Fix, midweek, midsummer hump day edition of the Sports Fix. You know how we do it. And today, you know how we're going to do it? We're going off the beaten path. I was talking to Dan Wismar earlier this week when we were on the show, and he's going to join us a little bit later today. And today, we're at that perfect time where we're about a week away from football starting. Baseball's got nothing happening except the All Star festivities here, which we'll discuss a little bit. But mostly today, we're talking football, some foosball, baby. We're going to talk some Browns and Buckeyes previews heading into training camps with Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland. We have put it off. Unlike many others, we haven't spent minutes and minutes and hours breaking down the insignificance of the off months, but it's time to start ramping it up. It's time to start picking it up. It is almost football time. Hell, I don't know about you, but I've been dusting out. Hey, did a little bit of Madden here and getting ready for the new season to come out, man, and starting to get that basketball wind down out of the way, and baseball again in the middle of a long season. Football's coming, and whether you're a Buckeyes fan, a Browns fan, an NFL fan, whatever it is, you definitely get excited about this time of year. So we're going to dive into that pot of gold at the end of the Leprechaun's Rainbow today with Dan Wismar and so much else, you guys. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get this bad boy going. Let's rock and roll. Welcome in to the Sports Fix. I'm your host, the Big Daddy on the microphone, J-Rocc, Jerry Myers, whatever you will. Just happy to have you here all the time, as I say, here on the Sports Fix, weekdays at noon, live across the Sports Fix radio network. Maybe you're listening on TuneIn, tunein.com, their radio and digital apps worldwide, a great place to enjoy the show live or on digital delay. Maybe you're listening on Spreaker.com or Mixler and their respective digital or mobile apps. Maybe you're one of the many more who listen every day, having some fun today, who listen every day live right on our home base, the sportsfix.net, one-stop shop for everything Cleveland sports, Sports Fix, headline, ticker, all of that right there. Bookmark it if you haven't, the sportsfix.net as well. Welcome into the thousands of you guys that listen each day around the world, 24/7 on digital delay, and I mean that all over the place, on sites like iHeartRadio, the world's largest internet radio provider, on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, all of the different places, CarPlay, Stitcher Radio. However you enjoy the show, get your feed, get your fix, all of those things. Thank you so much, you guys. Every day I say it, and every day I mean it equally as much for being here. Be a part of the show. As always, phones, Facebook, Twitter, just 3 ways to do the thing. Facebook.com/thesportsfix, Twitter The Sports Fix, CLE, email thesportsfix@AOL.com or pick up the phones 216-539-7535, 216-539-7535, Facebook.com/thesportsfix, Twitter @thesportsfix, CLE, email us thesportsfix@AOL.com. As I said, Dan Wismar is going to join us here in a little bit. We're going to talk some football. We got a lot to get into there. Buckeyes, Browns, but yesterday or the last couple of days here since we've been in studio, All Star festivities going on in Cincinnati. Mike Trout, how about Trouty last night, man, with the leadoff home run? That young man, you think he's got a little bit of a future? Just I don't know. He's been playing baseball for what 7 weeks, and he's already, no, I'm just kidding, but he's just getting rolling, and he's already now a 2-time All-Star MVP. Very select group. Only Willie Mays, Steve Garvey, Gary Carter, and Cal Ripken Jr., the only ones to be 2-time All-Star Game MVPs. He's, of course, the reigning American League regular season MVP, and as I said, he's about 3 days removed from his 16th birthday, so I think he's got just a slight bit of future ahead of him there for one Mike Trout. But something, actually, side off of the game, Pete Rose, he got his moment, nearly a minute and a half there where he got the standing ovation from the crowd as last night. And I won't lie, I didn't watch the All-Star game thoroughly, as I tell you guys this all the time. Not the biggest fan of many of the mid-season festivities, the All-Star games, the Pro Bowls, all of that stuff. Although many of you, and I'll agree with this, I've talked to you guys about the All-Star or the Home Run Derby the other day. They juiced up the format, and apparently many people happy with the new format, a bit more exciting than the way it was, but they are what they are, glorified exhibitions. And in today's day where it's hard enough to get everybody to take the regular games seriously as far as the athletes go, I'm not big on the whole exhibition game thing. It is what it is. But as that was going on last night, I got some interesting news. I said, and I'll drop this on the show tomorrow. Pete Rose, all the talk about him as last night's progressing. I can't even remember what time it was. I get a random text from a promoter. He's the one that I work for that is running the Brawl at the Ballpark at All Pro Freight Stadium, August 1st here, coming up in Avon, just outside of Cleveland. And this promoter sends me a text. I'm telling you, it was hilarious because it was just unexpected. We're texting back and forth about a couple of things, and he goes, "Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you, I've got Pete Rose booked for the ballpark next year. Tried to get him for this year, but it was just too late, and so I'm booking him now for next year. He's going to be at the Brawl at the Ballpark." So next year, in August, when we come back to Avon for what will then be the third Brawl at the Ballpark at All Pro Freight Stadium out there in Avon, one Pete Rose, the Hit King, he's going to join us, and that'll be fun. That'll be fun. He's, of course, got some history with pro wrestling. For those of you that are wrestling fans, he did quite a few things with the WWE, a running saga with Kane over a couple of WrestleManias for a few years. So that's going to be fun. Plus, hey, it'll be cool to have him involved and be a part of that, get to meet him. I've met him, but it's a different environment, obviously, here, probably a bit more intimate. So I'm kind of stoked about that here. This time next year, be working a show with Pete Rose, man, and doing some wrestling / baseball there. Anyways, that's next year. But circling back here, the All-Star game last night, first game there for Great American Ballpark since it's been open here nearly 15 years. 6-3 American League with the victory there last night. As I said, Mike Trout led it off. First player in almost 40 years. It was 38 years to home run, lead off the game, and again, back-to-back. And he is the first player to win the MVP in back-to-back All-Star games, even amongst the other players that had won it multiple times. American League now will get the home field advantage. 10th time in 13 seasons that the All-Star game has determined home field for the World Series, and the American League will now open the World Series at home because of the victory here last night. And I saw, too, already in just his 5th big league season, Mike Trout's got the All Star game career cycle. Absolutely. Prince Fielder had a game last night, too. Knocked in the RBI single off of Clayton Kershaw, and that was what really broke the tie early in the game and sent the American League heading towards that victory there. So, anyways, not a whole lot. Look, really, you guys, I'm not the bastion of talk about all-star games and home run derbies and stuff. Again, some people were more excited. I thought it was some tongue-in-cheek comedy of all the Royals fans complaining about who should be the MVP and if the voting was whacked. I mean, isn't there something ironic about the Royals fans complaining about the voting being whacked out for something involving the All-Star game? I mean, seriously, I saw somebody, I think it was Ed Revelator on my timeline there on, my feed on Twitter. He's like, come on, man, you guys, you already rigged it. You got your whole team in the thing. You got the best record, et cetera, and so forth. You were in the World Series. Would you just be quiet? Seriously, though, it was some comedy to me. Ironic, I guess, that they're complaining about that, but it is what it is. I'm not going to get too I don't get up in arms about anything that has to do with all-star game votings or MVPs or any of that stuff. It was what it was. Baseball wraps up another mid-season classic here, this one in Cincinnati, which is where the Indians will stay and pick up their second half of the season on Friday. When we get back on Friday, Mike Brandenberry will be here, Jonathan Knight will be here. We'll pick up on that and we'll look at the Indians' second half as it gets ready to start off again. I'm kind of glad to have these last few days off here because that end of we just got a bad taste in my mouth, as we were talking about on Monday, from the end of the way the first half ended there, that series with Oakland. So a couple of days off does us good, does it all good, and hopefully it does the Indians good as well. We'll find out here when we get ready to start it off on Friday. But we'll get more into that here in a little bit, as I said today. Dan Wismar is going to join us just a few minutes from now. We'll take a break. We'll get Dan in. A couple of things I just wanted to take of note. Looking around, you know what? Before I get into anything else, Browns, and we will get much more into this later, but I do want to address that I have followed up myself. Remember Monday, my man LG, Larry Glicken from Cleveland Sports 360, he had a story that he pursued that was told, about a potential injury to Danny Shelton, the Browns' first-round draft pick, etc., and so forth. I have vetted this myself with several people that I trust, and I've got to be honest, I can come up with nothing. As a matter of fact, I've had 3 people blatantly tell me the opposite, that Shelton will be there at the beginning of camp and that there is no story here. So I'm not in. Hey, look, I've had my Mark Trumbo moment myself. I'm in no way going to throw Larry under the bus. All I can say, though, is that I've checked around, and as best I can tell, there is no fire to this smoke here as far as Danny Shelton. But if there is, and I will say, again, sticking up for Larry, where he got it from, I can vouch that I know that he didn't just pull this out of thin air. I know what he was told. And again, hey, maybe he will get the last laugh. But I just wanted to say that in the last 48 hours, I myself have checked around with several different people. And as well, several people I noticed around the various journalism sources. I think Matt Miller was one. Another one, Ross Tucker, I think, from Fox. There were a couple of guys that I noticed that also said that they've looked into it and that there's nothing there as well. But we'll see when camp starts here next week. But I did want to throw that out there, that as best I can tell and as best I have vetted, there is nothing to the story, or perhaps there's not as much to that story. But again, we will find out. It would not be the first time that Larry has had the last laugh on many people who thought that he was incorrect about something. But I did want to definitely start off addressing that right off the bat, because as best I can tell, that was simply a story that thus far cannot be verified. We'll see when camp starts. And you know what? Dan Wismar had a great, really, the best point when we were discussing it for a few minutes on Monday was what Dan said. Really, to me, it's just the one question that doesn't make any sense is, what do the Browns have to gain by hiding something like that? As a matter of fact, I thought about it. It would be, to me, in their best interest to be opposite, to be out in front of that so that you can start to lower expectations perhaps a little bit heading into camp rather than giving people a sucker punch right away when camp starts. But we'll see when camp starts what the deal is at. But I definitely wanted to talk about that because I gave Larry time on Monday to lay out his side of the story, and I just wanted to come back with the counter that as of now, I can see nothing to verify that, and I was actually told the opposite, that he will be there bright and smiling and shiny and all that first day at camp. So we'll see what's up with that. But we're going to talk full about the Browns and the Buckeyes heading into their camps right after the first break here when Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland joins us. One other thing I wanted to talk about. Thought there was a really good piece. You guys know I enjoy the writing of Terry Pluto when it comes to Cleveland sports, particularly his editorials that he does. And I really enjoyed a piece that I read on him about David Blatt here this morning. Go check that out if you get a chance because, we didn't get a chance to talk much about it, but David Blatt really kind of opening up, peeling the layers of the onion on David Blatt a little bit here this week with some of the media appearances that he's done while he was dealing with coaching the Summer League team for the Cavs out there in Vegas. And for the first time, he kind of dropped that defensive veneer that he had, which he really picked up. And I don't blame him. I am that same guy. Like, I can totally dig where he's coming from, especially when you've been doing something for a long time. And just because I haven't done it on your playground doesn't mean that I haven't done it for my whole life. And you get real defensive and you stick up for yourself because you're taking shots across the bow left and right. I am that guy. That's why I totally was in simpatico there with David Blatt last season, but he did. He got his spine up in a bunch real quick and got into protective mode early on last season, and I think he was dealing with all of the things, and he talked about that here, how. As a matter of fact, he used the word he thought that going to the NBA was going to be a snap of the fingers. It was going to be a breeze, as he said, to move and transition into the NBA. And boy, did he find out that was and really far from true and the opposite. In fact, finding out that, and this was part of the article as Terry Pluto was spelling out, that in the NBA, the rest of the world, high school, college, Euro League, Israeli League, it doesn't matter where you play ball. The coach is the king, man. And in Cleveland and in the NBA, well, at least for last season, the king is the king. The player is the king, although we happen to have the king. But the player is the king in the NBA, and that is really what makes the league so different. I don't think it's a good thing at all, but it's the reality thing, regardless if you like it or not. And he really did. He had to grow inside. He had to deal with that. And that's hard to do. Some people cannot do that. Some people do not have the ability to grow as a person, to adapt. It is what it is. I'm set in stone and I'm rigid. And I give David Blatt credit because while he was rigid about confidence in himself, whatever he said publicly, he privately adjusted and adapted and figured out the game. He figured out the rules of the game that he was playing and figured out how to change to adapt to that game and still be able to do what he does that makes him so good, that brought him to the dance. But he really kind of came out and spoke about that at length here this week. Point blank said, hey, I'm not going to lie. I did this for 23 years at this level, at the NBA level, at the highest level in the leagues that I was in. I knew basketball. I knew how to coach. I knew this thing, and he talked about how just because admitting, and this is the hard part about growing for people, admitting what you don't know does not diminish all the things that you do know. And I can speak personally from many different aspects of my life, having to deal with that exact same issue and learning that. And if you don't, that's where in anything, whether it's physical or whether it's mental, whatever, where great is separated from good is separated from average. That's where those separations make. It's not just the talent. It's not just how good you are at what you do. I mean, of course, that's like the top end of it, but talent gets shut down when it does not have the ability to grow internally, man. Whether it's coaching basketball, playing basketball, whatever it is, you can snuff it out because that talent can. Like, what's one of the adages? Hard work always beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I mean, that's part of it too. But I mean, just the ability to grow, the ability to stop being so defensive and realize that just because I say to myself, I need to get better at this, this, and this, it doesn't mean that I'm not good at all these other things. But some people are very defensive, and the minute that they say one flaw, one weakness, hey, I've got to learn how to do X, Y, and Z better, boom, they think it nullifies everything that they've done, and that stops them from growing. We see it all the time, guys, in sports, in life, in maybe yourself. I've definitely been there before, and when you learn to get past that, you open up all kinds of new doors. And that was really, again, some of the stuff that David Blatt was talking about here. And he said, I knew that it was going to be different going to the NBA, but, it's basketball. But he found out that it's not just basketball, that it's very, very different. And mainly it's because of the player being truly the straw that stirs the drink. But it's more than that too. The time of the game is different. NBA is a longer game. They've got different three-point lines. They're a little bit different than trapezoid. There are some different setups on the court, different style of play a little bit. So a lot in many cases. So those are all things there that he had to adapt to. But I mean, really, this is why this guy is legit, and this guy is the guy to lead the Cavs to where you want for the next few years. You can say, oh, well, they're going to get there because of LeBron. I'm talking about beyond LeBron. I'm talking about the long term here. This is a guy that is going to be a successful NBA coach for as long as he decides that he wants to be an NBA coach. And I had that confirmed listening to some of the things that he's talking about here this week, because that shows the ability to take what you've got and make it better. And we saw him do that this season. I can tell you that not many coaches, I'm just saying, more coaches would have lost their job this season than kept their job if they were in David Blatt's position. And I dare you to argue with me otherwise. I think 70% of coaches out there would not have survived this. They would have overreacted to things. They would have overcorrected. They would have been unable to stay the course with certain things. They would have melted down from the outside pressure and all of the talk, and then they would have started putting themselves in bad positions with what they say to the media. We see it all the time. Next thing you know, those coaches are getting defensive and they're blaming their players. They're taking shots in the media at certain players, and we see it all the time because you get into protect mode and you're trying not to get fired. And this guy's the real deal, man. And you could see that as he talked about his thought process through the season. And he pointed out something that, I mean, we all knew this, but you love the way he talked about how literally having to change your entire everything going through so many times in the season. Every time that he said it, every time we would get used to a new change, like we would go, okay, this guy's out, so we're going to move this piece here and this piece there. Just as we would get used to that, something else would change, and we would have to get used to that, and then something else would change, and we just had to continue to do that. His ability to do that again, that showed something as well too. And that, to me, is what you get from an NBA coach more than anything else, because 90% of the stuff comes on the court from the players that are doing it. But the ability to game plan, the ability to adjust, to me, in-game adjustments are a lot on the players. You guys would be amazed how many times a coach will sit in a huddle and tell a player something and then watch it happen exactly like he told him on the court. So, you can say coach game plan and in-game is one thing, and that's true. But it really, a lot of that is what the players do with that. But in between games and preparing certain strategies, he showed that in short series, in playoffs, when you are going to see the same opponent 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a row. That's what gets you over the hump, no matter how great your players are. That's what gets you to the promised land, and that's what enables you to survive the depths of injuries that they did. So, again, you guys know I'm a fan of David Blatt, so I don't have to sing his praises here. And he is still, and this was kind of the end of Terry Pluto's article, he's still an unfinished product here. He's still got a lot to learn, and he's still got so many people have written him off already as being gone halfway through this next season. I respectfully disagree, and I just believe that everything we've seen and heard and watched from this man says that not only did the Cavaliers make the right choice here, even without knowing that LeBron James, and I don't care, people say they would have picked a different coach, they may have, but I think they lucked into the right thing, because this is a guy that can weather it in the short term and that can be a true asset in the long term, and I'm telling you, he can be a long-term head coach fixture here in the NBA for as long as he decides that he wants to. And maybe that's the issue there, is how long will he decide that he wants to do that. But right now he's got that hunger to prove he can do it at this level. And he's got something else. I say I can relate to some of these things. Something else he's got. It's that chip, that hunger, that chip on the shoulder, that desire to prove, maybe not necessarily to prove you wrong, because then you're worried too much about other people's opinions of you, but it's to prove you did. It's just it's that drive that not everybody has, to get out of your comfort zone when you're the best at what you do and go out there and be the best at what somebody else does, or at least take your shot at it, and throw your hat in the ring. Hey, for the last year, you guys know I've been coming back with wrestling. I've been joking with my friends that I am very, very, very much thinking about taking on a legitimate training camp and doing a mixed martial arts fight on the local level here for, one of the local groups, NAAFS or whatever. But I am highly, highly debating doing a training camp and legitimately stepping into the octagon and getting out there for a fight. Not because I've got this crazy pipe dream of being the UFC champion or anything silly like that. I just want, it's something that I'd like to take a shot at it. Man, hey, maybe I get punched in the mouth and I very quickly go, you know what? I don't like that very much. But you never know until you get out there and do it, man. And I just want to set the goal of getting out there and having a fight, training for it, putting a camp together, torturing myself through a nice little 6, 8, 12-week camp, however long we go, and then getting it on, man, and getting out there and seeing what happens. I don't know. So I can totally appreciate that mind thought, mind process, whatever. And I'm telling you guys, you got a good one here in David Blatt. Don't let those idiots in the media convince you otherwise. We got a good one here in Coach Blatt. Hey, guys, I'm going to take a break real quick. Let's get you some news, and let's get Dan Wismar in on the conversation and shift it over to the pigskin, baby. Let's talk some football. Buckeyes getting ready to kick off their national championship defense. The Cleveland Browns getting ready to start training camp as well. Let's talk some foosball, baby, with Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland, from the Cleveland Fan, and here on the Sports Fix. Coming up next, my friends, after the news, don't go anywhere. We're talking some football with Dan Wismar next here on the Fix.
The Sports Fix, the show that asks the question,
what you talking about, Lou? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou?
We'll be right back. American Revolution Wrestling presents Arena Warfare. Sunday, August 2nd at the Hara Arena in Dayton. Come enjoy a live professional wrestling event featuring appearances by Hall of Famers Bret, the Hitman Hart, and Lita. In-ring action featuring the franchise, Shane Douglas, Vader, Rhino, the FBI, and more. Tickets starting at $15 with VIP tickets including a special early access meet and greet with the star. Arena Warfare. August 2nd at the Hara Arena. For more info to purchase tickets, visit AMREVWrestling.com.
Hey, this is Scott Fujita, and you're listening to The Sports Fix.
No football? No problem at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted. From their awesome Wing Mondays to every single Cavaliers and Buckeye Hoops games in full HD, the excitement never stops. Every day of the week brings a different set of food and amazing drink specials. Fight fans, Harry Buffalo North Olmsted is the home for every UFC pay-per-view live on the big screens. And let's not forget their mouth-watering trademark, the Bison Burger. Nobody does bison like Harry Buffalo. The perfect combination of healthy and delicious. What are you waiting for? Get to Harry Buffalo, just outside Great Northern Mall today. Harry Buffalo. Join the herd.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go, fish dad.
Oh, come on. This is WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Fantasy sports lovers, you put so much time, hard work, and effort into playing week to week that it quickly stops being a fantasy and starts getting real. Real time spent making real decisions, creating real victory.
I'm the greatest man in the world!
And when the smoke clears, you want to show off those victories with a real prize. I mean, a really real prize. Nobody does that like Fantasy Jocks. The crew over at Fantasy Jocks have beautiful, high-quality, and heavy-duty championship belts, rings, trophies, and so much more for all your fantasy sports needs.
The trophy's 12 feet high, and it is glorious!
Football, baseball, hoops, you name it, they have it. Plus, they have awesome draft kits and party supplies to make all your preseason activities the envy of everyone. If your league needs a ring, belt, or trophy, or you want to upgrade what you already have, there's literally only one place to go. If you're going to be a fantasy jock, do it right.
It's mine, the most magnificent belt ever created, and it's mine.
With America's fantasy sports superstore, fantasyjocks.com.
What's your fantasy?
Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Signs and Ship, the official printing source of the Sports Fix. Locations in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida. Find out more at signsandship.com.
News break.
Good morning, I'm Bob Picozzi. For the third consecutive year, the pennant winner in the American League will get home field advantage in the World Series thanks to the AL 6-3 win in the All Star game last night in Cincinnati. The winners got home runs from Mike Trout and Brian Dozier, who wasn't added to the All Star game roster until last Sunday.
You know, it's crazy how everything transpired last week with all the final vote and not getting in and then getting in. You know, it's a lot of up and down roller coaster. But it all worked out in the end, and more importantly, we had a lot of fun here, man. This past few days have been very, very exciting.
Trout was named the All-Star Game MVP for the second consecutive year. Cardinals left fielder Matt Holliday, who's been on the disabled list since June 9th with a strained quad and had to miss the All-Star Game, will increase the intensity of his running today and tomorrow. He expects to return to the St. Louis lineup on Friday. ESPN NFL insider Adam Kaplan is reporting that the New York Giants are expected to sign former Baltimore Ravens safety Jerome Miles. Two-time Masters champ Tom Watson said today the 2016 Masters will be his final one. He made his remarks at St. Andrews, where he begins play tomorrow in what he thinks will be his final British Open, 4 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow on ESPN.
Sports Center is brought to you by TrueCar. If you're in the market for a new car and want to have an amazing new experience buying it, you need to check out TrueCar. Save time, save money, and never overpay. Download the TrueCar app today.
Now, back to the Sports Fix.
Welcome back to the Sports Fix Live. J-Rocc back with you here. Dan Wismar is going to join us. It's going to be we're already lightning round version of the Sports Fix today. We're going to talk some football, some Browns and Buckeyes, and whatever else Dan feels like talking about. You guys, thanks for being with us here, however you've joined us, and keep the conversation going. Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/The Sports Fix. Tweet with us at The Sports Fix CLE. Email us, The Sports Fix at AOL.com, Facebook.com/The Sports Fix, Twitter at The Sports Fix CLE. Email us, The Sports Fix at AOL.com. We'll get into the second half of the season for the Indians on Friday, although I'm not saying we won't talk a little Tribe here, but today we're going to definitely focus on some football, and who knows where it's going to go, but we'll have some fun with it. Dan Wismar from the Cleveland Fan and Everybody Hates Cleveland. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
J-Rocc, my friend, I'm doing great. Good to be back with you. We got to get through these next 2 days, Jerry. It's 2 of those days during the year when there's no professional sports games on. I was thinking about that the other day, and it used to be. I used to have this trivia question that I liked, which was: there's 2 days every year where there's no NFL, NBA, NHL, or Major League Baseball games. What are they? And it used to be the answer was just 2. That it was the day before and the day after the All-Star game, because they used to go back to playing games on Thursday. The last few years, I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3 years now that they've done this, so they don't even schedule any Thursday games either. That nobody plays a game in MLB until Friday of All-Star game week. So I was putting out a tweet earlier this week that basically said now there's 3 days a year where there's no Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL, or NBA games, and they're all this week. Monday, Wednesday and Thursday of All-Star game week. And then I got to thinking, maybe that's not right. Maybe there are a couple other days, because I was thinking, hey, the end of the baseball season comes around, and it usually ends right around October 1st. I know the NHL doesn't start until maybe a week into October. NBA doesn't start playing until first week in November. So there might be some days in early October when it just so happens that there's no games played, like after the baseball season is over, but their playoffs haven't started yet. NHL hasn't started yet. College football is going, but only on Saturdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, that kind of thing. So anyway, I went back, not to belabor this point, but yesterday I went back and checked on 2014. What happened in 2014? Was there a day in October when there was no professional sporting event, regular season, or playoff game on any of those days in early October? And I found out basically the answer is no, there wasn't. Baseball season ended Sunday, the 28th of September. On Monday, there was no playoff baseball, but there was a Monday Night Football game. So, and then starting Tuesday and for the next 10 days in a row, there were Major League Baseball playoff games. And by the time that the Wednesday, October 8th rolled around, the hockey league season had started with the NHL opener. So I did find out there is one other day, though, Jerry, where there is not any of those games played, and that is Christmas Eve, it turns out. Both the NBA and the NHL do not schedule games on Christmas Eve. So that would be the answer to maybe the next trivia question, that outside of All-Star Game week, there is one day, and it turns out it's Christmas Eve, where there's no, unless, of course, Christmas Eve falls on a Thursday, Sunday, or Monday, in which case thereuld be an NFL game.
Absolutely, because then the NFL's there.
I had to get that all out there because when I have entirely too much time on my hands, I go and research stuff like that.
Which apparently you did, and that's cool though, man. I'm with it, and you are right. This is the. I admitted I came clean at the beginning of the show. I'm not an all-star game guy. I didn't sit there and go. I barely paid attention, and then I went back and paid attention to what I needed to do the show today. I don't. It's just not my thing, man. Monday night, I caught myself at 6:45 or whatever time I left the gym, and I pick up the remote and I go, I wonder what time to try. Oh, they don't play tonight, and I caught myself doing it, and.
Well, I was just looking this morning. In fact, Bruce had something on Facebook about Willie Mays being his favorite player of all time, and I thought, wow, my recollection of the All-Star game, and I used to be heavily into the All-Star game. Like you, I'm not nearly as much into it anymore. But part of the reason is, I think, is we get to see all these guys all the time now. It used to be when I was a kid that the only chance you got to see Roberto Clemente and Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Sandy Koufax was that one day in the All-Star game. And, you might see a game of the week on TV once in a great while where you'd see a National League team play, but we didn't see National League teams play when I was growing up. We would just see Indians games, and even that was nothing like the 150 games they show on TV now.
And it was even
so.
If I
wanted to see Clemente and Aaron and Mays, I had to watch the All-Star game, and I was interested in watching the All-Star game for that reason.
Another reason you were interested is taking exactly what you said and flipping it over to the players themselves. I have read so many accounts of past years, all-star games and stuff. Just the way it's even described by the players is different. They didn't have chances to play against, so it was a big deal for, like you said, whether any two guys you want to throw out there, to be out there against each other because they only had one shot. There wasn't even a 2-round playoff series. There was one team and each side is going to meet in the World Series. So the interleague thing didn't exist, and the ability for the great pitchers to face the great hitters didn't exist. And you would listen to those players joke, whether, Clemente, any of those guys, and you would hear them talk about, hey, I wasn't missing a chance to get in there and take my swings against, Bob Feller or against Whitey Ford or whoever it is, you know what I mean? And that was one of the things, too, is they gave more reverence and importance to it because it was their only chance to, A, play against each other, and B, to see those people in person too. And a lot of times those players would talk about how their only chance to see some of those guys ever. So you go, hey, how does he live up to the hype? Well, I saw him in person. I don't know. Or yeah, he does, or whatever. But that aspect is different from it too. I mean, us as fans, that was going to change even if they didn't do interleague play because the national, television and the ability to see everybody. But even that changes there on the field because they all play against each other so regular that there is the very rare, this guy has never pitched against this guy. You don't get that big marquee stuff like you did even as late as the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. And it used to be, like you say, the only postseason series was the World Series. And how often would a San Francisco Giants make it into the World Series so I could see Willie Mays play on TV at any time other than the All-Star game. I consider myself fortunate that, in my youth I was able to live close by up in the Heights, and I was able to go down to the stadium and see the great players of the American League at least come in and play the Indians, the Harmon Killebrews and Frank, Brooks Robinsons and Mickey Mantles and Harmon Killebrews, guys like that. But never was there the opportunity to see Clemente and Mays and Aaron and the guys that were in the National. So the All-Star game used to hold a whole lot of appeal to me. I would be riveted to it just to watch those guys play.
I agree. I'm totally different for me as a youth than it is now, for sure. Now I can take it or leave it. Just, let me know who won. And to be honest with you, depending on what else happened yesterday, I don't even necessarily need to know who won. And I'm just keeping it real, man.
Yeah, but, a lot of people, and just briefly talking about the home run derby.
Yeah.
To me, it's a big yawn. It always has been.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never really gotten into it. I didn't have any intention of watching it the other night. But I think the consensus, and I don't know if you've seen a lot of people, weighing in on the new format where they've got a timed period instead of a certain number of swings. I think most people thought that the new format made it better as opposed to worse. That people like the new format more than they like the old one. Guys can take timeouts and the clock stops. And I have no idea where the bonus time thing came from, or how you earn bonus time. I wasn't watching it closely enough to get that. But I think in general, they've worked at making it better, more exciting, and more fair and competitive. And I guess from the reactions that I've seen, it seems like they've succeeded in doing that. Most people were happy with how the new format went.
And that's another one that is to me, the home run derby is a byproduct of a different era, because during the same era that the All-Star game was important for all the reasons that we just named, it was as well the only time that you could see the top 3 or 4 home run hitters from each side on the same field swinging at the same time. And so I think that had a lot more draw and a lot more mythology to it back in the day as well than it does now. And plus, to me, I mean, once the steroid thing got blown off, that just kind of, to me, the home run derby then kind of became something to shy away from for baseball and stuff. But I'm with you. That was always a video game type thing, you know? I mean, I've said this all the time, I get into the 3-point shootout for the NBA thing because that to me is a skill deal. And I used to get into the slam dunk until it stopped becoming, it turned into the circus thing that it was. As a kid, the home run derby did have me. Like, that was one that I was into, and it's again now something that is nowhere near as much, and perhaps it's because you learn how many of them acquired that power that allowed them to hit the ball, but it was still different, and many of that is the function, as we said, of seeing these guys on such a regular basis. It just takes that uniqueness and that specialness away.
Yeah, you're right. I think also, in recent years, well, I don't know about if it's even a recent phenomenon, but it seems like in All-Star games, pitching always dominates over hitting. And I guess if you want to see somebody hit the ball out of the park, you better tune in on Monday. There were a couple homers last night, obviously. Trout and Dozier hit one out. But for the most part, home runs in All-Star games are pretty rare. Hitting in All-Star games is pretty rare. And, although I will say that one of my great memories of Cleveland Indians baseball was being able to be sitting in my seat at the 1997 All-Star game. Sandy Alomar.
Yes.
Sandy win that game with a home run. But like I said, if you want to see balls leaving the park, the All-Star game typically isn't your venue to see that. And fans want to see long bombs hit out, and so hence the home run derby is born, and now you can get your fill of it on Monday.
Yeah, there you go. And like you said, I had a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, it was much more exciting." I couldn't weigh in on that, to be honest with you, but I'll have to take your word for it, man. Either way, baseball celebration. Hey, I was stoked to announce that everybody got to see the Pete Rose little ovation moment that he had last night. I just missed out on working with Pete Rose this year, but a year from now, I will be working an event with Pete Rose, a wrestling and baseball together type of thing, which is pretty funny, but just randomly got a text I was telling people this morning that said, just missed out on Pete Rose, man. It just isn't worth it. We don't have enough time to promote it for this one, but yeah, man, and knowing, even if he is 75, knowing his inclination to enjoy the pro wrestling business, Lord knows what may happen next year when Pete Rose shows up in Avon.
Yeah, that's true, and it'll be great. Maybe by that time I'll be able to afford a Pete Rose autograph. I can hitch up, and I don't know what Pete's charging for his signature these days. But.
I'll get you hooked up. But I've already put in a request for him to be my manager for the night. I said, look, man, if I've got any stroke with the office here, I'm requesting Pete Rose. I want the Hit King. I want him to bring a cork bat out with me. I'm going to cheat. I want him to have a chain in his left pocket. I want him to have a betting slip in his right. I don't care. I'm joking. But I want him to be loaded up with gimmicks, and I just want him to help me cheat my way to victory next year. I just want to have some fun working with Pete Rose. I think that'll be enjoyable.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. In fact, yesterday on Twitter, and you see things on Twitter and you don't know whether they're really true, especially when you see a photograph and you see a quote in quotation marks, and you say, did he really say that, or is that just somebody making that up, or thinking that's what he should have said, or captioning the picture? I saw a picture of Rose yesterday, and I guess it was during his All-Star Game appearance, and they were asking him what his chances were getting into the Hall of Fame, and the quote was, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to make any odds on that." And I thought to myself, now that's almost too good to be a real quotation from Pete, but. So I to this moment, not sure whether it was or wasn't, but I thought it was funny.
I've heard him make almost that same joke, so that definitely was legit. That came from Pete Rose. I've heard him make that similar. He said something along that line, because WWE put him in their Hall of Fame because he did a couple of appearances for them that are kind of well remembered over the years, and he made a joke about it at that time, about him getting into the other Hall of Fame, and he said I wouldn't bet on it. So I have no doubt that came directly from Pete Rose for sure. But he got his moment last night, and to be honest, you and I talked about it. That's probably as far as it's going to go. I mean, you heard the commissioner. He said, yeah, I'll get around to it. I think what they're hoping is to never have to get around to it.
Right.
just kind of let the clock run out on that one, and then say, well, we were going to, but unfortunately we just ran out of time. But like you and I said last week, he kind of got nailed by the last little bit of evidence against him there that kind of took any steam out of. I haven't had anybody since that came out a month ago or whatever. I haven't had any of the Pete Rose people come back at me with any more of the, hey, let's let Pete Rose. Now they just kind of quit. They all just kind of said, you know what? Yeah, that's about all we can do now at that point. We don't have anything left to fight with, because at that point,
not a lot of bullets left in the gun there, and
you can't.
No,
and I
just
did.
sort of goes into that category with Shoeless Joe Jackson, where these guys are sitting off to the side here, and there's no real push being made because the arguments are hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean, I was that guy. Jonathan Knight and I used to be on polar sides. Like, well, he cheated, and I get your argument, but I would always come back with he didn't bet on his team, and whatever. But hey, man, everybody does this and that. It's Pete Rose. He's been out long enough. But at this point, you go, man, no, they're right. He should never be allowed back in the game for sure, because that's breaking the rule that you can't break, and now you've been proven that your last lie was your last lie. So I've given up the fight for Pete Rose as well. You have to. I mean, really. I mean, now his last little thing that he was hanging on is toast. So long. That's all you can do with that one. Did you?
Yeah, that's right. It's no more arguments to make. You can make the point, and again, not to belabor it, but you can make the point that letting him back into the game, as in letting him be a coach or letting him be a commentator or letting him associate with Major League Baseball, that is one thing. Putting him in the Hall of Fame for his playing career is another thing. And you could separate the two and put him in the Hall, but not ever let him be associated with Major League Baseball again in his life. But even that is kind of splitting hairs, and if you do one, you do the other. I heard somebody say the other day when they put Joe Jackson in, then we can have the Pete Rose conversation.
And that's a fantastic.
That's a legit point.
That's an absolutely legitimate point there. So, I'm with you. And it is what it is, man. But anyways, that's kind of in the spotlight. And then the Indians will just kind of kick around a couple of days in Cincinnati and get started on the second half of their season. You and I, we can get into it more on Monday. We'll see how the Red Series goes here. But I was just doing some trolling around, some All-Star break stuff about on the internet, looking up some things towards the second half, and you gotta love when you roll past. I'm sure you saw it at least twice. I've seen two different people reference the fact that the Indians had discussed trading Nick Swisher again as early as 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the minute he ended up back on the disabled list, that scuttle-butted any talk of any potential trade. Now, granted, we were going to have to bring in a ridiculously awful contract anyway, but perhaps that contract would at least be healthy enough to take the field. But wouldn't it be something that you couldn't even get into that conversation before he went down again? But the Indians sit here and find themselves with so many questions that I just think it's impossible to say they're a buyer or a seller. They're just a team that needs to play better and not depend on help from anybody else.
Yeah, that's true. And I saw a long, drawn-out evaluation of a proposed trade of Swisher to Atlanta, was it, for
Chris Johnson?
Chris Johnson, another guy with a bad contract that they're trying to unload. So who knows? But you went ahead and you did it. You jinxed yourself. You said Swisher on the air, and so who knows what bad things will ensue.
Who jinxed us worse, me or them who signed him? I think we all jinxed ourselves, man. So
yeah, that's true. But anyway, we were convinced we were going to talk football today, so let's do something.
We are absolutely. And as we shift gears, let's start there. And I don't know, you want to go college? You want to go pro? I mean, really, let's
talk little Buckeyes for starters, because I think they're going to be. They're not going to start camp quite as soon as the Browns are. They don't start fall ball until first week of August, I think. I'm not sure which day exactly, but they've only got, I think, 20 practices that they're allowed before their first game, and we know the Buckeyes are going to start a little bit late. They're going to open on Labor Day, nationally televised game Monday night after the first week of games against Virginia Tech, and we know a couple things about the Buckeyes. We know they're going to be favored in every game until they lose one. they're going to be the consensus number one team coming out of the gate, and with that comes all that pressure and all that the need to sort of suppress the complacency and the whole idea that you're going to take the field and win because you're who you are, or because you're Ohio State, or because you've got 15 starters coming back or whatever. And I think the coaches started hyping that and pushing that, and they're, from all indications, they're pushing especially hard with conditioning. They're pushing, they're working these guys like crazy, and they call it the grind down there. And they've got the grind going in full gear because they know that really the only thing that can take this team down is getting a big head or getting complacent or thinking that's going to come automatically.
And you know what, Dan, you and I have kind of talked about setting the stage there, the potential for the upside of what this season could be for the Buckeyes because of the wealth of talent that may only be here for this season, as we've seen and talked about. But already, and this is scary, knowing what the Indians just went through, but Lord knows they're catching some love for the Buckeyes all over, all the hype from. But Phil Steele, did you see his rankings for everybody in football? And he's got the Buckeyes literally top 3 in the nation in nearly every positional category as he broke down all the teams around football. He's got them first in the nation in quarterbacks. He's got them second in running back group, 8th in receivers, 4th in offensive line, 3rd in defensive line, 2nd at linebacker, 3rd at defensive back, and the only place that Phil Steele's got them even outside the top 10 is on special teams, where he's got them 12th in the nation. But I mean, Phil Steele, a lot of people get excited and overhype and stuff, but he's somebody that is pretty well respected for his looks at teams. And I mean, right off the bat, I mean, everybody, not just one guy, one group, everybody kind of focusing on the Buckeyes here. If they live up to their potential, which is always the biggest if, I mean, it's amazing to think how spectacular this season can be for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, you're right. And like I said, the only thing that can take them down is, well, let's put it this way. If I had to bet, sort of like taking Tiger or the field in a golf tournament, take the Buckeyes to win it all or not the Buckeyes to win it all, I'd have to bet that they wouldn't, just because it's so damn hard to repeat and so hard to go undefeated in the first place. Last year, no team did it. The year before that, I think one team did it. I mean, 128 D1 football teams or FBS teams, and it is a rare thing indeed for a team to win all their games. And you know that nobody in the SEC is going to do it. There's just too many good teams there, and everybody's got flaws, and lots of good teams, especially in the West, that are going to beat each other up. Big Ten is a little bit of a different story, not quite as tough top to bottom. And teams have, favorable schedules. If you want to see one, look at Penn State's schedule. They've got a ridiculously easy slate, with the exception of at Ohio State and at Michigan State. But they should roll in their other 10 games. But it's just hard. If you had to bet that they're going to do it, you'd have to say no, they probably won't, because it's hard to get up every week and somebody might trip them up. And the Buckeyes have a tougher non-conference schedule, I think, than most people think. I mean, Virginia Tech, obviously, the team that beat them last year. This year, you go down to Blacksburg to play them. Opening game. No patsy to soften up in a game one and then face a game like that. You get them right out of the gate. And then you have Hawaii coming in here, and that's going to be a relatively easy game, you'd think. But then you play the next 2 games against really legitimately the 2 best teams in the MAC in Northern Illinois and Western Michigan. Those are pretty much by consensus the 2 best teams in that conference. So it's not like you're going to beat up Akron and Kent. You're going to play some legitimate, bowl teams in your next 2 games before you get into the Big Ten. And, the Big Ten starts out a little bit soft with Indiana and Maryland, but then you get Penn State, and you do avoid this year for the Buckeyes. They do avoid for the second year in a row Nebraska and Wisconsin, arguably the 2 best teams out of the West. But still, you've got to travel to Michigan this year, and your other road games are relatively soft. You're at Indiana, at Illinois, and at Rutgers. So you don't have a real daunting road schedule in conference, but you do have to go up to Ann Arbor for that final game, and Jamar Ball had eye for that one.
Oh, you know that one for sure, man. That's actually the most. Let's start with the fun question here, which is going to be really interesting to see. Look at the quarterbacks, and by the way, all the experts, all the prediction of Braxton Miller this and Cardale Jones that. Instead, nobody went anywhere, and all three of those cats are coming in here in the beginning, anyways, to compete at quarterback. Let's talk about the fun position. How do you see this quarterback race breaking down here? Because embarrassment of riches is a good word to use there. It's definitely a luxury, but let's talk about that, man. What do you think are the odds that Braxton Miller, let's assume Braxton Miller's healthy, which everybody just skips right past Braxton Miller and jumps into Cardale Jones and JT Barrett for good reason. What if Braxton Miller can ball? What if he jumps back out there again? That is a very interesting wrinkle into this whole thing.
And Urban Meyer has been pretty candid about an obligation that he feels to Braxton to play him, to at least honor him, respect him, and obviously this guy's a two-time Big Ten Player of the Year, offensive, and it's not like you're conceding anything or doing anybody a favor to start Braxton Miller. Let's remember, there's nothing wrong with his legs, and never has been. So he's electric. He's going to be the same guy that he was. I understand that he's worked hard on the weights. People say that Braxton is bigger in the upper body. He's sculpted. He's got the six-pack. He's been, in physical conditioning, he's stronger and bigger than he's ever been. That's not going to make his passing be more accurate, but he's got something like over 5,000 yards passing in his 3 years as a Buckeye QB. Not huge numbers by some standards, but it's still 5,000 yards throwing the ball. Not like he can't pass. He's got 52 career touchdown passes. The career record at Ohio State is 57. And that's another thing we've talked a little bit about in the past, but Braxton is on the verge of rewriting record books for total yardage, or total offense, I should say, where he's only 500 yards behind Art Schleister's career record. He could do that in 2 games. He's only 1 touchdown behind Schleister's all-time career record for total touchdowns, rushing and passing combined, at 84 to Schleister's 85. So these are records that are going to fall, before the Big Ten season starts, and assuming he's playing quarterback. And of course, the touchdown record could fall anyway because he could get a touchdown rushing or receiving or returning a kick for that matter. And I think if Braxton's arm does turn out to not be healthy, you'll see him doing all those things. You'll see him in the game as an H-back, in the game as perhaps a punter, kickoff returner, or in the game as a slot receiver, because they do want to put the ball in his hands. He's just another weapon in what amounts to an unbelievable arsenal of skill position weapons that the Meyer has this year. But I do think, in answer to your question, I think that Braxton will start if Braxton's arm is 100% healthy. I also think that we will see situations where Cardale Jones will be on the field too. Yeah. I think we've talked. I'm a JT Barrett man. JT Barrett.
Yes.
Talk about that career record of 85 touchdowns accounted for. JT Barrett had 45 last year alone in his freshman year. So no matter if Braxton breaks that record, it's probably not going to hang around for very long with JT Barrett coming up. And JT Barrett has almost been written off by people. And for the reason, I think it's a bad reason, is that he's got 3 years of eligibility left, and so he can, quote-unquote, wait his turn while Braxton, finishes out his eligibility, and Cardale Jones, who all he did was go 3-0 and win the national championship for you, take over this year, and presumably Jones will be gone after this season as well to the NFL. But the point needs to be made that Cardale Jones, that big arm and that ability to throw ropes 45, 50 yards down the field and make a team defend deep as well as wide, is a big reason why Ezekiel Elliott ran for 200 and some yards in all 3 games in in the postseason last year. You put Braxton Miller back in there, and you got a lot more packing of the box and safeties coming up and making it more difficult to run the ball. So you can't discount that. But at the same time, Jerry, Urban Meyer's offense is based on read option. Cardale Jones doesn't really run read option anywhere close to the way Braxton or Barrett can and do run it. He had a crucial fumble on a handoff in that Oregon game where he, thought about handing it off, then decided against it, then decided to try to stick it back in there and ends up with the football on the ground. So he's not a read option guy necessarily. Doesn't have the decision making and the ease of running that offense. So, it may be better after a year off of full spring ball and fall practice. But that's not his game. His game is drop back and stretch the field and when in doubt, take off and run over linebackers, for first down yardage like he did in the postseason. But if I were a betting man, I'd say Braxton will start because of the loyalty factor and the obligation that Meyer feels to him, and also because he's just so electric with his legs. But if he can't, I think we'll see more than one QB playing, and playing not game 4, game 5, but game 1. I would suspect that we will see more than one QB on the field for Ohio State, and if nothing else, to force every team left on the schedule to prepare for 2 or maybe even 3 of them.
For sure. And, you really just kind of hit it all. I'm not really going to go back on what you just said. But, to me, what is so interesting, awesome, intriguing, whatever words you want to put with it, is the fact that you've got just completely different guys. Really, there's differences, even though there's similarities to each one of those quarterbacks. You could make a completely different argument of why each one is better or each one stands out over the others. They all have a different asset. You know what I mean? That's what's incredible about it, and that's why I think that exactly what you're saying is very possible. I was telling some people as far as Braxton, as to me, like the one thing that would make me not want to have him be the starter per se is that I'd potentially have an offense where there's always 2 quarterbacks on the field, and by that I mean Braxton Miller and somebody else. And the problem there is that sometimes then they've got so much talent that you can almost get too fancy and get too cute with things at some point, when really this team can pick its way of how it's going to beat people, because you've got the quarterback position that's a 3-headed monster. You've got the offensive ability with those skill players that they're starting to continue to advance with, but then you've got the running. Really, this is a team that can pick the way it's going to beat teams, which is a strength by itself. But that's what's amazing, man, is that you've got those different ways, and then on top of that, you've got each of these quarterbacks who brings a different thing. But I can really see exactly what you said, Braxton Miller and one of the other guys being on the same field at least maybe 30-40% of the time for the Buckeyes this year.
Yeah, you're right. And going back to what you said about not wanting to get too cute or too complicated, and things may change a little bit with Ed Warner as the offensive coordinator instead of Tom Herman this year, but I doubt it, because I don't know about you, but I watched. I went back this off season just about a month ago and watched championship game with that the coaches corner, the feed that ESPN had with the coaches sitting around. It was Dan Mullen and a bunch of other guys commenting all throughout the game. And one thing that Mullen, who has worked for Urban Meyer, of course, said was that, he will keep running the same play over and over again until you stop it. In other words, he's not going to get any cuter than he has to get.
And I love that. I love that. Do you know what I mean?
And we saw it in that Oregon game. They had the one play where they motioned Jalen Marshall to the right, and they run a little counter back to Elliott, and Elliott ran for the touchdown on the first time, and he ran a ball down to the 1-yard line again later. I kept waiting for them to fake to Elliott and pitch to Marshall, or pitch it out, a little screen out to Marshall on the right side. They never did it. They must have ran that play with the option about 8 or 10 times, and then never once did they give the ball to Marshall going on the right end. Why? Because they never stopped Elliott on the counter. Elliott was picking up 8, 10, 12, 14 yards a pop on that play, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. and it was great to see because Oregon never did pick up how to defend that play.
Same thing with Alabama.
And so Meyer didn't stop running it.
Same thing with Bama. I mean, that was, and we talked about it at the time. I mean, when you're watching a game, you know who's dominant when they're just doing the same things, the same principles, basically the same plays over and over. And you go, man, they can't stop them. They're just going, you know what? We're going to run this draw up the middle until somebody tackles Ezekiel Elliott. And boy, y'all are having a hard time tackling him. So we're going to keep running this play. And they just steamroll teams, man. And that's a good thing. Like you said, I don't like a coach that gets bored with himself and goes, hey, man, we've ran this draw play too many times. Let's go run that double reverse we've been practicing. No, continue to run the draw until somebody tackles that man before he runs for 10 yards,
Yeah, that's right. And so that's Urban's personality. He'll rack up the points, and he doesn't really care how he does it. They averaged 44 points a game last year, and obviously those touchdown records, and they've been each of the last 2 years they've set numerous Ohio State season records for points, touchdowns, victory margin, number of games in a row of 50 points or more, those kinds of things. It's just routine. You tell people, these are the good old days, relish it while it's here, because for 10 years under Tressel, as much as they won, it was frustrating. I went back the other day and watched that. BTN's been showing the classic games, and I watched the OSU-Michigan game 06, number 1 versus number 2. That game, that was the last game before they went out and got drilled by Florida. And it was frustrating to watch the offense of Jim Tressel in 2006. I remember beating my head against the wall then and beating it against the wall again the other day, rewatching it. How simplistic it was, how simplistic the passing game was, how we thought, hey, this is Ohio State. We shouldn't be, punting from our opponent's 35-yard line like Tressel used to do and just make me crazy. So he won a lot, but he won boring offensively. And this is the offense now that we're seeing at Ohio State. It's the offense that we've been dreaming about ever since, Earl Bruce left. And
absolutely. And at the same time, they have the running back that takes you right back to the old days, baby, to power the opposite side of that. So that's what makes this team so unbelievably deadly offensively. I mean, think about.
Oh, yeah, and they can be exciting running the ball. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I don't mean it's all wide
I'm
open
with
passing attack, but
yeah,
just when you're racking it up and when you have the confidence that if you're inside the opponent's 50-yard line and it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, we're going.
Yeah.
Because why punt? They had fewer field goal attempts last year than any time in recent memory. I think they were, not many more than a dozen, maybe 13, 14 field goal attempts the entire season. Less than one a game. They used to do that before the Big Ten schedule started when Tressel was here, just because there'd be so much. Just conservatism, and you can't knock conservatism because he won, 7 Big Ten titles in 10 years, but and it wasn't always dazzling to watch that offense work.
Oh yeah, the choke's wide open on the offense that this time of the decade, that's for sure, man. But going back to Zeke, man, think about it. Ezekiel Elliott, you guys, he had nearly 1,900 yards last season. Almost 800, seven and some change came in those final 3 performances. 220, 230, 246, just continuing to do better and better and better with Wisconsin, Alabama, Oregon. I mean, we saw that run. I just think that's amazing that big of a really, really developed there at crunch time when you needed it the most. What are you looking to see? How do you follow? First off, how do you follow that? That's the premium of sell high. You know what I mean? I don't think his stock could have been much higher than it was coming out of the last 3 games of the last season.
Yeah, and the scary thing is he can be better, and all expectation is that he will be better. He had that surgery on his wrist, could only carry the ball in one hand
right
all season, couldn't stiff arm with his left hand, because of the wrist
blocking.
injury.
Because of it, his
And-
blocking was affected. Yep, absolutely.
Now he's a fabulous blocker. He's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. The only thing I think that can keep him from being a Heisman finalist is how good the team is, and how
not
deep the
enough
team is at
opportunity.
running back.
Yeah,
And there are games when he might be on the bench in the whole second half with 180 yards rushing in the first half, but not putting up monster numbers because he's not playing in blowout games.
Especially earlier in the season, when they're seeing what other guys can do, when they're giving guys opportunities. I can see exactly what you said. Earlier in the season, I can see a lot of second halves where he's sitting there, his day's already done.
Yeah, no doubt. And they really like what they're seeing out of Briante Dunn, who's got one more year left. There's a really, really good young freshman named Mike Weber who's going to be a true freshman, but a lot of people think he'll be one of the top 3 running backs, certainly. And then there's Curtis Samuel, who one of Meyer's favorite players, who experimented this spring with putting him out in the H, putting him out at a receiver, getting the ball into his hands because he's so talented coming off his freshman year. I think he had 350 yards rushing or something, had maybe 50 carries last year. But he's getting ready to break out, and so between those 4 guys, Elliott, Samuel, Mike Weber, the freshman, and Briante Dunn, who everybody is saying is really coming on here as a senior, the kid out of Glen Oak. They've got a real stable, and that's why Phil Steele has them, number 2 or 3 in the country in terms of the running back group. They're deep and good, so it's not just Elliott. And it may hurt Elliott in terms of his individual honors, that the team is so good and that he has so much depth behind him.
And what you said, man, you could make an argument. You could take Ezekiel Elliott out of that grouping, and they still have a hell of a running back grouping there without the top guy. That's when you could go around this Buckeye roster, and they've still got to win the games that they play. But you can go around this roster and take the top guy, and that's depth. That's true championship level depth. And we mentioned how you may really appreciate the depth of this team 12 months from now when you're looking at how many of those guys came out in the draft potentially next year. But you could literally peel off the top layer at a lot of these positions and still be a national championship contender. I mean, same thing. You go through the wide receiver position. You lose a Devin Smith. You got a truckload of guys here that have been just waiting for their opportunity. I'm a huge Jalen Marshall guy, man, and I think that we've just begun to see the top end of what that kid can do. But, I mean, again, another position where they continue to have guys there ready to step up and move right in.
Yeah, you're right. And a couple of guys that a lot of people don't know about. And by the way, I'll just pitch my 10 breakout Buckeyes article over at Everybody Hates Cleveland. I picked out 10 players that most people don't know about yet. Curtis Samuel is one of them, so a lot of people know him, and Raekwon McMillan, number 1, 2 on that list. But the other 8 guys are guys that really haven't played yet. And among the wide receivers, a kid named Terry McLaurin coming out of Indianapolis, who redshirted last year. And 6'1", 200, lightning fast, 4'4", just ready to break out. Noah Brown, the other receiver, who played just a bit at the H-back last year and comes in this spring and wins the starting job opposite Michael Thomas. And Michael Thomas is showing up on all kinds of All-America lists, as well as Jalen Marshall. Dontre Wilson coming off his injury-plagued year. So there are just so many kids. Paris Campbell, the kid from St. V's, who will be a redshirt freshman this year. They love him as a receiver. Again, so much speed and so much talent. Too bad there's only one football, but it's going to be entertaining and lots of fun to watch.
Oh, I agree with you. All those guys you named. Dontre Wilson, that's another one there that, I think the sky's the limit for that entire positional group there. That's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, really, again, you can go around the offense. I mean, we're talking offense, because this is an Urban Meyer team, and their offense was prolific. I don't even know if that's a strong enough word last year, and probably going to be stronger this year. But, man, it's so easy to overlook the Buckeyes defense, because that Buckeye defense defense, they can hang their hat on themselves as well. Would they hold teams to last year? Was it about 5 yards per play there? They were
under 5 per play.
Under
yeah,
5,
and
yeah.
I think the points. I think it was 13.
Yeah.
Average that they surrendered, and they've got so much of that talent coming back. Really, there's only one spot on the defense, Jerry, where they're concerned, and the coaches have been candid about it, and that's defensive tackle, where you lost Michael Bennett. Now you do have an All Big Ten player, Adolphus Washington, coming back, but the depth at that position is not something Meyer's been happy with. It looks right now like either Tommy Shutt or a kid from Shaker Heights named Donovan Munger is going to be playing that other spot next to Washington. They have so many good defensive ends. Obviously, Joey Bosa on one side, and there's a kid from North Carolina named Tyquan Lewis who has won, coming out of spring, has won the defensive end job on the other side opposite Bosa. But they've got kids, Darius Slade and Jalen Holmes and a couple of freshmen, Jay Sean Cornell and some other kids coming in. They're very deep at the end position. Because of that, I think, Sam Hubbard is the other guy, a kid from Cincinnati who redshirted last year, and Meyer kind of kicked himself at the end of the year for redshirting because he came on so strong. Had been a safety in high school at Moeller and then became an outside linebacker. Now finally was settled at defensive end and just barely got beat out by Tyquan Lewis this spring. Because they're so good at the pass rushing positions and the defensive end, you may see Bosa sliding down inside, especially on 3rd and longs, to get your best 4 linemen on the field. Put Bosa down inside next to Washington and let Hubbard and Lewis both play the ends or Jalen Holmes or some of these other kids. Linebacking is going to be very, very strong with Josh Perry and Raekwon McMillan in the middle and Darren Lee who just knocked everybody out last year with his play. And the secondary is stellar. I mean, what can you say? Von Bell, the other safety whose name's escaping me, the Glenville kid. Eli Apple at the one corner and probably Darian Conley from Massillon at the other corner. They're loaded and maybe depth at corner might be a little bit of a concern depending on if Marshawn Lattimore, redshirt freshman from Glenville, is 100% back off his hamstring injuries, but Damon Webb and they have some good freshmen coming in, Denzel Ward. So really the only question mark on that whole defense, really in terms of a position group where they're thin, I think they still think defensive tackle is where somebody's going to have to step up, whether it's Tommy Shutt, Donovan Munger, or Dylan Thompson, any one of a number of kids that are talented but unproven. We haven't seen them deliver it yet with 105,000 people watching. Yeah. And that's really where one of the big stories to watch this season is going to be who's that guy that comes up, wins that job with his play. And my money is on Donovan Munger. I like what I see out of him this spring. He played a little bit last year, so I think he's a sophomore, but a kid from Shaker who's about 6'5", 310 and has a bad attitude when he chases the ball carrier. So I like what I see out of him, and he's my choice to kind of be the guy there at defensive tackle along with Adolphus.
Oh, yeah, and Adolphus Washington, to me, is going to reap a ton of the benefits of the attention on Joey Bosa. I mean, I think he's a guy that may owe some potential future earnings to playing alongside. There's always guys that are in the right situation at the right time, and I think that he's a little nasty by himself. Then again, there with Bosa and all the attention that he's going to get, I agree with you, though. There's going to be a lot of opportunity there. You mentioned them linebackers, Darren Lee and Raekwon McMillan. That's somebody I've got a spot for there, too. I mean, defensively, you brought up the under 5 yards of play, under 4 yards a rush, held teams to, 30% on 3rd down, 45 sacks, 6 defensive touchdowns, and I believe the defense will be better than they were a season ago. What do you think? You think they take a step back this year or a step forward? I think they're better than they were last season.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt they'll be better. Certainly deeper. Tyvis Powell, by the way, is a safety's name that I couldn't come up with.
Tyvis Powell,
But just the linebacking experience, Darren Lee having a year, Raekwon McMillan being, I think, an upgrade. I think Raekwon McMillan's going to have a huge year.
Me too. Me too.
He was at, I thought he was at his best in the last two games, Oregon and Alabama. He didn't play much. Curtis Grant legitimately won the job as a senior and played well, played better than he ever had in his first 3 years. But it just seemed like when McMillan got his time on the field, when he got his reps, he was involved in everything. He's very quick sideline to sideline for a guy that big, 6'2", 245, something like that. And it just seems like the instinctive middle linebacker. He was rated very high. But there are people around football that don't have him as one of the top 5 or 10 inside linebackers in America. I think that's going to change by December. I think he will have a phenomenal year. I see him being all Big Ten first team, and I see him getting some mention on All-America teams by the time the season's over, because I think he's just that good. And Josh Perry back for his senior year on the other side of Darren Lee on one side and Perry on the other. They're very strong. Their second group of linebackers, talented but completely green inexperienced. Dante Booker from St. V's, Justin Hilliard, maybe the top recruit in the incoming freshman class, a kid from Cincinnati, who looks extremely promising. But so they're very talented, but they're green. They don't really have any game experience to speak of. You hope that linebacker group stays healthy, because there's a lot of inexperience right behind them.
Man, we've kind of thrown some stuff out from time to time, but that's the first good, lengthy Buckeye football talk you and I have had since they won the national championship, my man. It feels good to be back on the field, kind of almost, and talking about some Buckeye football again, man, because...
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about it.
You got me fired up, man.
Say one word about Michigan State. Michigan State has stepped up the recruiting. Clearly, they're the class of the Big Ten after Ohio State. They were last year. That game was very close till the Buckeyes kind of broke it open right at the very end. This year we get Michigan State at home, which is, in our favor. But one thing to look out for, and you saw that Phil Steele had the Buckeyes offensive line about number 3 or 4 in the country. Yeah. You notice who we had number 1 at Michigan State. Yep. They are unbelievable offensive line. Jack Allen's a first-team All-America center, and Jack Conklin, their left tackle. I watched that game again, the Ohio State game. Jack Conklin at left tackle had his way with Joey Bosa last year. Joey Bosa, I think, had 1 tackle in that entire game, and he had no other marks in the book in terms of hurries or sacks or anything else. Jack Conklin handled him, and that got my attention. Sometimes I think, Big Ten offensive linemen get a little bit underrated, and I think that's the case with him, although he shows up on a lot of the All-America teams preseason. But look out for that group, and they also have a really good defensive line. That's where games are won and lost, so don't sleep on Michigan State. They are really, really good this year. Connor Cook is being touted as one of the most NFL-ready quarterbacks coming out. My jury's out on him. I'm not 100% convinced of that, but he's a local kid, and anytime except when they're playing Ohio State, you don't mind seeing the kid from Hinckley, light it up and do well.
Absolutely.
But they're a genuine, I think, national title contender. And Jerry, we'll find out real early because they host Oregon in the first week of the season. September 5th, Oregon at Michigan State in East Lansing. That's going to be a hell of a game, and it's going to tell us a lot about what the rest of the season is going to look like for both teams.
For sure. What a hell of a first one to come right out the gate with that one, I mean, that's going to be good for us, but boy, tough to hit the ground. Hey, you want to play with the big boys, I get it, but man, that's a tough one to hit the ground running with. Outside of, we talked Ohio State, you mentioned Michigan State. Outside the Buckeyes, outside the Big Ten, who's your top 3 this year outside of there?
Well, I think you have to look to the TCU Baylor game on November 27th and say the winner of that game has a really good shot to possibly still be undefeated and to get into the playoff. I will say that TCU has a good shot to be that team, although they have games. I think they play at Oklahoma State and at Oklahoma. I think both of those are road games for them. Both of those teams are going to be good again, especially Oklahoma, and TCU could get knocked off. But I like them, and they're ranked number 2 by most people behind the Buckeyes. A couple sleeper teams I think you might want to look out for. Clemson is one. I think the schedule's favorable for them. I think they could possibly come out of the ACC. Florida State's going to have, obviously a new starting quarterback this year, and I think the rest of that group, I would look at Clemson as a team that could surprise people. And a lot of people like Stanford to come out of the pack. I'm not 100% sure about that. USC is as talented as anybody else, but they're maybe a little bit of a sleeper. But I would say, and out of the SEC, boy, most people like Auburn better than Alabama just because, again, Alabama's going to be breaking in a new QB, and they lost a lot of talent. I still, I guess, would go with Bama. And by the way, before I forget, wanted to mention, heard this morning, Nick Saban down at the SEC Media Days, kind of, I don't know if it was in the context of really making an excuse, but he said he thought that the draft preparation evaluation for his team's juniors had an effect on their mindset, looking for a reason, why did you guys lose to Ohio State? One of the reasons that he said was that he felt that some juniors that were going out into the NFL were maybe playing not to get hurt, like maybe running out of bounds when they shouldn't have, or they were playing tentatively, and he thought that was a factor in the game. Seems like a lot of sour grapes from Nick. And like someone else said, I'm waiting to see some game film of an Alabama player running out of bounds where he otherwise might not have if he's a junior NFL eligible player. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting that Nick Saban pressed for some reasons of why they lost to the Buckeyes. Came up with that one. But I don't know. I guess somebody's going to have to beat Alabama in the SEC before I pick them. But a lot of people think, hey, Texas A&M might be a sleeper down there this year. They're loaded, and some people are picking Auburn to win the West. I guess I'll stick with them with Texas A&M as a sleeper down there to come out of that group. But it's hard to imagine a 4-team final without a team from the SEC. But that group is pretty balanced this year, and there's going to be some 2-loss teams there. To win the West, the West winner might have 2 losses. A team that gets into the championship game of the SEC might be coming out of that with 2 losses. It's going to be tough to make the case that they belong in the championship round if there's 4 teams with 0 or 1 losses that have had big years. So that'll be interesting, but it's very balanced down there. Georgia's very good over in the East, and people like them to win the East and make it to the title game.
I love it, Dan. You remind somebody that the Cavaliers lost 37 players before the NBA Finals, you're just making excuses. But Nick Saban, the almighty Nick Saban, says, hey, man, I think a couple of my guys were distracted. Doggone it, that explains the whole thing, man,
Right. We didn't get
out-coached.
We didn't get outplayed or out-coached or anything like that. Anything crazy like that.
It. I'm telling you, man. Anyways, talking some football with Dan Wismar, and, man, we haven't even touched on the Brownies, which, by the way, I don't know if you heard at the beginning of the show, but switching over to them, I mentioned that I have talked to several people who insist to me that Danny Shelton will be 100% when camp starts. However, we talked about what LG said, but I went back and I mentioned at the beginning of the show, to me, my biggest thing with the whole thing was really what you said on Monday, which is what benefit does it serve to hide the thing? I thought about that, and I said, to be honest, after I got off the air, I'm like, you know what? Dan's got a great point. If anything, it's better to tell people that let's lower these expectations as early as possible. But I didn't know if you heard me, but I did. As best I can tell, there is no, at least no verifiable proof to that. Although nothing, legitimately coming from the Browns or Danny Shelton. But I've talked to several people who say, but either way, whether that was or not, I wanted to use that to bridge into the Browns, because as you and I talked the other day, with or without Danny Shelton.
Within a couple of hours, Jerry, of me hanging up the phone with you on Monday, I guess if you can take any source as being the voice of the Browns, I guess it would have to be Nathan Zegura. I mean, he's the employee of the Cleveland Browns who's paid to be the media voice of the organization. And within a couple hours that they ran it by him, and people were saying that he had said that the Browns front office had told him that it was 100% false. And for a change, I'm glad that LG was wrong. Or at least it appeared that he was wrong. And I'm glad of that, because you don't want those things to happen to anybody. But
for sure, and I
anyway,
hope he is too. And I say that with all, hey, I love you, LG, but I really do too, because that's a big blow to the Browns. And again, I'm not writing off what he said until they report to camp or whatever. But at the end of the day, even if he was, the whole point I wanted to use that is to segue into whether or not Danny Shelton was 100%, 50%, or 0%. You and I mentioned the other day that the Browns, one of the main things that they actively did in the offseason was to beef up the front seven and the front, especially the front four of that defensive line there, and bring in a ton of bodies on top of, obviously the big one is drafting Danny Shelton there, but whether they signed Randy Starks, who a lot of people just blew right past that signing. Starks is not going to move the needle huge in one direction, but that's a very capable guy there that's going to contribute down on the line. Xavier Cooper is, I think, the draft pick that the Browns made this year that may be the most overlooked heading into camp, but that's a guy that I think has the real ability to jump right in and contribute. But you've got the guys that were here, the been there, done that Browns defensive lineman, hopefully healthier Phil Taylor, John Hughes, Billy Wynn, Des Bryant, Ishmaeli Kitchen. He finds a way to continue to stay on this team year after year. And there's a ton of other guys. One guy that I'll just throw out there that nobody's mentioned, he's a name you shouldn't mention, but he may stick, is Christian Tapu, because he's a guy who's got a pedigree and a real, he's got that Samoan bloodline. That's somebody that may stick, or at least make the practice squad down low. And we're not even mentioning Armani Bryant, who they're talking about moving to perhaps linebacker, because they're now so deep on the front that they may find a spot for him coming off the edge. But I think the Browns, if you can say they accomplished one thing for real this offseason, it's making the run stopping and the defensive front better.
Well, yeah, you're right on all points, and they're so much deeper. And like you say, the return to health of some guys, and obviously over the course of the year, guys get dinged up. But and one of the big names there, I think, is Desmond Bryant. And, Billy Wynn too, and they signed John Hughes to a contract. They're much deeper, and it's going to be hard for some of these guys to make the team. I think we may see some surprises there. We know for one thing they liked Armani Bryant, and they have moved him to outside linebacker. The other new name at outside linebacker is the guy we got a little glimpse of last year is Solomon, right? Scott Solomon,
Scott Solomon. He's really taken the...
O'Neill and Patton love this guy.
The coaching staff loves him.
They just think he's a disruptor. The odd man out in that group, as much as I hate to say it might be Barkevius Mingo, because he hasn't had the production that they wanted, and maybe hasn't adapted as well to the outside linebacker spot. You've got Kruger, you've got Solomon, you've got Armani Bryant. There's another guy whose name I'm forgetting. But maybe Mingo's on the outside looking in at this roster this year, because something's going to have to give.
Oh, I think it's a make or break off season or camp here for Barkevius Mingo, no doubt, as we start to look over to the line. But I think about it: how many defensive line traditionally do the Browns come out with? Because, I mean, you just with the guys we've listed, you're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's legitimate 8. All of these guys should make the team if you're going 8 deep, and that's not even touching a couple of the outside potentials there. I mean, I've got to think they learned their lesson. One of the things that Mike Pettin talked about last year was being in the bad position of just running out of every time you turn around, you lost another guy, and I mean that attrition up front. And I think they're going heavy But how many front guys do you see them coming out of camp with? Do you see them going 7-8 deep easily there?
I think 7 or 8 is just typically the number that most NFL teams carry.
Yeah.
You want to be heavier, a little heavier in linebackers and DBs because mostly those are your special teams guys.
That's where Armani Bryant
I'm trying to think how many last year they did carry, but because so many guys were in and out with injuries that it's hard to kind of keep track. And they were bringing people in and putting people on injury reserve during the course of the year. But I've got to believe that Cooper, they spent a 3rd-round pick on him, going to make the roster.
Oh yeah,
and Shelton obviously, and then Billy Wynn and John Hughes, your other two tackles, and Phil Taylor. That's 5 tackles just right there before you even talk about your ends.
Your ends.
So yeah, it's going to be a crowded thing, and that's not counting Kitchen either. So there's 6 guys that you can probably maybe only keep 4, maybe 5. Your ends are going to be Desmond Bryant and who else? I mean, unless you're counting some guys that you're going to sort of mix and match and use in a 3-4, and that there's less of a difference between an end and a tackle in a 3-4, I guess. And I saw them play Billy Wynn on the outside a few times last year, and so we'll see how that goes. And maybe there are guys that they can look at it to play, either inside or outside on that 3-4, but
and you know what?
Maybe 7, maybe 8. I would think probably minimum 8.
But I mean, looking at the numbers there too, that's where Armani Bryant to me is in no danger of not making this team here coming out of camp. But that's where he becomes double valuable because you carry Armani Bryant, that's 2 for the price of 1. You're carrying a defensive lineman and a linebacker at the same time there with the ability to utilize him on the line even if he comes out of camp as a linebacker. So that's an additional body of depth there because not every linebacker is able to also step in and help you up front. So that's something there. But yeah, like you said, there's going to be some surprises, some names that have made this team perhaps the last few years that are going to get squeezed out here because the numbers game. But that's a good thing there, and that's a good problem. Here we go. Took me a minute to look it up. The Browns only broke camp with 7 defensive linemen up front last year. So I'm thinking 8 alone would just be Starks, Shelton, Cooper, Taylor, Hughes, Wynn, Desmond, and then you got a spot whether you want to, depends if you want to what you will qualify Armani Bryant as, but let's just say it went to Kitchen. Regardless, there's probably 1 available spot for Ismaili Kitchen and 6 other guys grouped together there, but I think they got to go 8 because last year you had depth issues, and as I just looked up, they went 7 deep coming out last year, but we'll see, and that's where Bryant does throw in because he enables you to carry a linebacker who can also play up front.
Yeah, well, and you remember that there was a reason they moved him to outside linebacker, and that was he was getting pushed around a little bit in the run game on the inside. And Armani Bryant may come back this year. Hopefully, he'll come back with a little bit more weight up top and maybe down low too. Just hopefully a little bit of size and strength. Because he was pretty rangy and pretty slender on that big frame. I think he goes about 6'5", doesn't he?
Yeah.
And so he was a little bit. He didn't have the bulk really to play that 3-4 end spot. So hopefully he'll come back stronger and bigger.
He has the ability to get to the ball a bit, which is why they're trying to find a spot for him to take advantage of that. I go to a quote from Jim O'Neill, talked about Xavier Cooper there, man, and keep this in mind. If you guys like these guys that they've got up front, Jim O'Neill said Xavier Cooper has a different skill set than anybody else that we've got, and his ability to get off the ball is better or right up there with every other guy we've got up front. So I think, and that's why I keep pointing him out as a guy that I think very quietly is going to, much like last year, Christian Kirksey continued to, develop and really put his foot down. I see that here. I think Xavier Cooper is going to be a big part of what the Browns are doing up front, and that would be a good thing there to continue to get those middle picks, as you said, a 3rd round pick there to contribute in a starter or part-time starter role right off the bat. That's something the Browns have not successfully done for much of the last 15 years.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the reasons I was so enthusiastic about this draft that they went and got players that thought that could contribute, and they didn't focus necessarily on what position they played or getting a quarterback or reaching for this guy or that guy. Watching the film of Cooper, like you say, the thing that impresses you is the first step, the quickness, the penetration, and got some good upper body strength too. But it's the quickness and that first step that you see that really jumps off the screen at you when you watch highlight film on him.
I agree with you absolutely there, and that to me is the key. What we're talking about, why we're talking about this, that's the key to how this whole defense is going to go. And now you're already starting to see a lot of the training camp previews. Because I'll pose the question to you: what does your gut tell you? Is this Browns defense going to be as good as, are we convincing ourselves of how good they are when you go back and look? Tom Reed had a good piece in the Plain Dealer about this, and he mentioned looking at how effective they were against Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck and the Colts. I'm looking ahead to this year having to deal with Peyton Manning and the Broncos. But, look at how effective they were at times against strong offensive performing quarterbacks, and especially you look at that Colts game and what they did, how they should have won that game if the offense would have given them anything. What do you think? Is this Browns defense as good as people think and we think and they talk that they have the ability to be, or is that more of we see them every day, so we see them as a little higher function of what they are? Because if this defense, that's going to be the key to what this team does this year, is what is the top end of this defense. I think that they're going to be pretty ruthless for the reason that you brought up. They've drafted a bunch of bodies that don't necessarily fit into square holes. They can do multiple things. Versatility and athleticism has become important, and I think they've got a very versatile group of players on the defensive side of the ball.
I would agree. I think one of the things we've learned in recent years in the NFL, big key to success is good corners and lots of them. Yeah. And this team certainly is as deep at the cornerback position as I remember it ever. They brought in Trayvon Williams. He's a starter from a good team. A lot of it I think will come down to what kind of play they get opposite Joe Hayden. Is Trayvon Williams the guy, or is Justin Gilbert going to be the guy who steps up, or is it going to be Kalen Williams, or is it going to be Pierre Desir? They've got talented guys. I saw Pro Football Focus is a site that I've just been recently checking out. Yeah. They picked an all AFC North team from last year. Both of the Browns starting safeties were the safeties on that team. Whitner and Gibson. Obviously, we hope that Gibson is coming back 100%. But also, they picked Kalen Williams as like the third best cornerback in the AFC North. They hardly even played a lot, but they loved what they saw out of him. A year of improvement from him, a year of improvement from Justin Gilbert, and you brought in the veteran Williams to play opposite Hayden. We haven't seen a group of corners that deep ever in Cleveland. And they were already, number 4 in the NFL against the pass last year as a defensive secondary in the aggregate. They were already, I think, top 5 ranked in the NFL last year without the improvement and the year of experience and the added depth. So, depending on what the play you get, they're not very deep at safety, not nearly as deep at safety as they are at corner. They did draft the kid Campbell out of Northwestern.
I was going to say, watch out for
Abraham Campbell. They have another couple safeties coming in that they like, and you have Batamosi, and you have some talent still on the roster there. But, the cornerback depth is as good as we've seen.
Yeah, you mentioned him. Ibrahim Campbell is somebody I'd say keep an eye on. I think that he's got a chance. He's got a chance, in my opinion, to kind of take that backup spot from Batamosi there for sure, depending on what he comes in and if he.
And they do need to groom a replacement for Whitner. For sure. He's not getting any younger, and that's what they're looking at. And Campbell is reportedly more of a strong safety than a free safety, and that's the Whitner spot.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that say that that's potentially what he could fill into. Although, hey, replacing a Dante Winner is easier said than done for sure. But I'm very much hanging my hat for this team on that side of the ball. Their success, to me, success is going to be determined there. Offensively, if they can row the boat and keep it moving, that's a successful season for them. Let's switch over. I mean, look, there's no real reason for you and I to do the quarterback thing because we all know what we've got, and if it can just be adequate, then that should be decent enough for the Browns this season. They're not going to send any quarterbacks to the Pro Bowl, but if they can avoid, the opposite end of that, then we can be all right. Just find the middle ground. I'm very intrigued by the running attack of this team because I believe the offensive line is better than it was a year ago at this time, and I think that prior to Alex Mack getting hurt, the Browns had one of the top 3, 4, 5 offensive lines in the NFL. They added depth to that here this year with Irving coming in and the additional first-round pick, and I think that this team, offensive line, you're looking top 5 in the NFL, no doubt, the way they sit right now. And you added Johnson to the running back pool. You've got Isaiah Crowell coming back in. You got T. West. Don't forget about Sean Drawn and Glenn Winston, who are both guys, you may not have heard of them, but they've got potential and they've got some motors there, and there's a reason that the Browns are bringing them back as well. So you've got 4 or 5 backs there, plus a couple of fullbacks that I like that are good. One of them's going to make this squad, Malcolm Johnson. Telfer's like a slash fullback tight end guy, but you've got some good depth at the running back position and one hell of an offensive line to run those guys behind.
I don't think there's any doubt, and it's not just us Cleveland homers sitting here saying that. The experts around the league know how good the Cleveland offensive line is. Add Cameron Irving to that. A lot of people, everybody's in a rush to replace Greco. Now granted, I think you'd be right in saying that if John Greco is your 6th man, because he can probably play four of the 5 offensive line positions. If he's your top backup at every place but left tackle, you're stronger for that. Yes. But let's not be in a rush to replace John Greco at right guard because he ranked very, very high in the rankings of the people that evaluate every single play as one of the top guards in the NFL. I think top 15 guards in the entire NFL, John Greco. So let's not be in a hurry to move him out of there. And the same with Schwartz. Schwartz grades very high. People in Cleveland been down on Mitchell Schwartz for a couple of years now, and he got better in the passing pass protection. He was always an excellent road grader, run blocker, and he grades out very high too. And those are the guys that are the no names on the line. Mack and Thomas obviously, and Batonio made some All-Pro teams last year as a rookie. So, yeah, I would agree that they're strong, and people around the NFL know it. It's not just us Cleveland folks.
For sure. I'll tell you what, Irving, that's interesting you bring that up because I was telling my son when we were talking about him, I said, I'll tell you what, I think he's got as much of a chance to bump Schwartz off at right tackle there than he does necessarily Greco as well. And like you said, if Greco would become your 6th guy, you could be a hell of a lot worse than that. And if Irving's your 6th guy, same thing there because that's a guy that can potentially play any position across the line. But I think the Browns are just and hey, we're not even touching on the fact a guy that nobody has mentioned that I think has a lot of potential is Michael Bowie, who they snagged from Seattle a season and a half ago. If you guys remember, Seattle was mad about it coming off of their victory, their Super Bowl win. They were mad because they were trying to stash him on their kind of injury. They were trying to float him through, and the Browns grabbed him off of waivers early in the offseason last year, and they sat him through. He did not play. He was injured reserve all season this year, but he's a guy that a lot of people graded out as a very high prospect for Seattle. And Seattle knows a thing or two about offensive linemen, and the fact that the Browns have kept him around this long, that guy, he's just now healthy and just now coming back into the equation. Do not count him out as well. The Browns have incredible depth at the offensive line this year.
You're right, and I've heard about him, and they also like the kid Tyler Luce that they signed.
From
Northern Illinois.
Northern Illinois, yes.
And so, yeah, it's just I think the board, you can just see not only does it help immensely to have your coaching regime in its second as opposed to its first season.
Yes.
Something we don't get the luxury of too often here. Obviously O'Neill and Pettin, their second season with the defense, and that's why I've said a few times now that the focus, all the pressure, all the spotlight is going to be on John DeFilippo. See what he can do, whether he can move the ball, score points, score touchdowns. Maybe he has some magic he can work with Terrell Pryor or some of these other kids that he has some familiarity with. But you're right about the running back group, and I like the idea of having the one big back in Winston. The other three guys are mostly the gap running thing, and he's going to run that same program that Shanahan ran with some twists. And I think the biggest twist we'll see is, as we've mentioned, they're going to throw the ball more to the backs, and that's where Duke Johnson comes in, I guess. But he's the man. He's the guy that has to step up and perform, and it'll be interesting to see how they do, and if they can put 20 points a game on the board, I think they're going to they should do real well.
And then, of course, you and I, and we've talked a bit about the changes at wide receiver. I think the Browns are better at wide receiver than they were a year ago, and last year they were better at wide receiver than they were the year before that. To me, if you're not going to go make the big splash, then I guess that's the only level of progress you can measure. I think the Browns are significantly better at wide receiver than they were 2 years ago. What the high end of that is yet to be seen. Does Dwayne Bowe have a big comeback in him? I'm not as highly as down on Hartline as some people are. I think that he can be adequate. I love Hawkins. Think he's going to add more. I think if Josh McCown can bring a little bit more consistency to the quarterback position, I think those guys will all be adequate to above, and there's a couple of young guys, as we know. Moore's in there, and Maley, and at tight end too. You've got Barnage, you've got Drake. Rob Hausler is a guy that they've brought in to take a look at here. You've got Telfer. You've got a couple of young guys there. You're going to be surprised, I think, at least one name that comes out in the tight end position. But I believe that this is a group that perhaps is being a bit maligned unfairly. And normally the Browns wide receivers deserve the criticism they get, but I think that this team is better than it was a year ago offensively, and I think that, I don't know, with the quarterback position being where it is, how much better you wanted them to get other than this. I just don't know how much more you could have upgraded it yet. It seems, without drafting. Now, obviously, you wanted to go get somebody in the draft that's different. They didn't do that, but it's better. Where are you at with that? I think the guys catching the ball are a better group collectively than they were a year ago, and that's a good thing at least.
Well, I think you're right that certainly they're bigger and they're more experienced. Last year, once you subtract Josh Gordon, you've got a bunch of Smurfs. You've got Gabriel, and you've got Hawkins, and you've got Benjamin. None of them, as far as splitting them out wide, it's going to be hard for any of those guys to even get off the line against some of the big corners. You're not going to have that problem with Bowe. And I think Cleveland fans are going to love Brian Hartline.
Yes.
All he does, first of all, he's fast.
All he does is catch first downs, baby.
He's always had good speed, and he catches everything in the area code. So, he's got great hands. You're not going to worry about Brian Hartline dropping balls. He just doesn't drop
Dan,
balls.
Stop right there, Dan. Do you know how many freaking wide receivers dropped passes for the Browns the last 4 or 5 years?
Actually, fewer than you'd think.
Well, it depends on what you call a drop, but I know what you're saying. But in general, even if you don't call it a drop, how many times have we seen him go, man, they should have caught that. They should have caught that. Brian Hartline catches everything that he's supposed to catch,
Yeah, that's right. And people look at him and say, well, he's a white guy. Well, he must be a possession receiver. Well, no. Brian Hartline goes down the field and catches the ball, and he goes deep, and he's fast. He was a state-ranked hurdler in high school, and he can get down the field. So I think just, the fact that he's a local kid and everything else, I think Browns fans are going to take to Brian Hartline. Who knows what Bowe has left in the tank, but you've got Gabriel with another year experience. Everybody's raving about Gabriel in the mini camps and the OTAs.
Yes.
Uncoverable. Hayden, tips his hat to him all the time. And Hawkins, we know what he can do. So, I think they're deeper. with Bo and Hartley, you basically brought in 2 NFL veterans. You don't know what they've got left. Maybe both of them are past their prime, but beggars can't be choosers. We needed to supplement that receiver core, and I don't think there's any doubt it's better and deeper and certainly way more experienced than what we saw a year ago.
I agree. And for those of you guys that want to cross your fingers and hope for something good, looking at I'm just saying, I've been monkeying around with the Browns here and experimenting with this new roster. Simulated out next season, our boy Dwayne Bowe had himself a 78-catch season, got himself 1,100 yards, averaged about 70 catches, or averaged about, what did he have, 8 touchdowns for the season? And, he averaged about 70 yards per game receiving. I said, you know what? If he can do that in real life, I'm good with that, man. If he can get back over 1,000 yards a game, I'll take that at this stage. I don't need 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns from Dwayne Bowe. Give me 7-8 touchdowns, a couple of them coming in the red zone. Give us 1,000 yards and 75 yards a game, and that'll be what you can expect from him. I'd be happy with that.
Oh, no doubt. I'd be thrilled with that. That's the kind of production that he's accustomed to putting up, not counting last season. And everybody's scratching their head about why he didn't catch any touchdowns. I've read some different things about that, the way they ran their offense, and obviously they just didn't have a very good offense at all in Kansas City. But I expect him to break out and get back to catching some touchdowns this year.
Dan, next week they're going to report and they're going to start practicing, and then we're going to have some real football to talk about, my man. We went extremely long today, but it was worth it. We have not talked football in 6 months, my friend. It felt good. Not really talking it, rather than just
right. And it's been by design, not by accident.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now football season's coming. I don't got to feel guilty about it or anything, man. It's time. We're allowed to talk about football now. But,
that's right. They start tomorrow, and so you're right. By next week, we'll.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much access the media is going to have these first few days, but at the very least, I think they'll be out there. They could give them at least a little piece of time during the day to get a little bit of film and to interview some guys. So. And we'll be able to see whether Danny Shelton's walking around on 2 legs or not.
I guess so. You get to record the 15-minute stretching period, and we'll see how they all look in shorts and talk about that for a couple weeks. When you and I get back on Monday, we'll be able to talk about whatever's coming out of the first rumblings of Browns camp, and let's see how the Tribe kicks off the second half in Cincinnati this weekend.
That sounds good, Jerry. Thanks for having me, and I'll catch up to you next week.
You got it. My man, Dan Wismar. We're not even taking another break. We blew so over with this one. We're taking it home, baby. We're going to the house. Thanks to Dan Wismar from EverybodyHatesCleveland.com and the Cleveland Fan for joining us. Friday, we'll be back in the house. Jonathan Knight, sports writer extraordinaire, joins us. Mike Brandenberry from DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. He's in the house as well, plus you guys, and you never know who's going to show up here, so you show up here as well, and we'll see you Friday. Same bad time, same bad channel, baby, live at noon, right here across the Sports Fix Radio Network. Enjoy the only day left this year until Christmas Eve with no Major League sporting events to keep track of, and we'll be back on Friday. We'll kick off the second half of the Tribe season and more right here. Where else but on the Sports Fix? We love you, baby. Cleveland and beyond. We'll see you Friday right here on the Fix.
Long nights, cold weather, it ain't nothing pretty. So much hate up in this itty bitty city. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Put your hands up in the air, everybody say yeah, yeah, yeah.